All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. This is the Magic Steve and Zenith will rule. We're going to try that again. This is the Magic Steve and Zenith will rule podcast, otherwise known as MSZ.
What you
I am
gonna
Magic
do,
Steve.
brother? What you
Oh,
gonna
yeah, what you
do
going to do?
when Zenith Mania runs wild on you, brother?
Oh, yeah. That was the worst Randy Savage impression ever. Anyway, ladies and gents, thank you for tuning in. This is MSZ. I am Magic Steve. My partner in crime over here is Zenith Will Rule. How you doing, Zenith?
I am doing fantastic. I spent last night playing One Piece Pirate Warriors 2 for like 5 hours straight. It was
Damn, son.
glorious.
One Piece Pirate Warriors 2. What type of a game is that?
You know Dynasty Warriors, right?
Hmm. Yes, I do.
It is basically a One Piece game in the style of Dynasty Warriors. So you get a whole bunch of characters, you beat up thousands of people as a lot of the cast, and it's a lot of fun. So I was spending the night working on a trophy which has you play through like 20 characters, doing 5 stages for each character. I've been working on this for a while, and it's a lot of fun because it lets you try out all the different characters. Some aren't very fun to control in certain senses, but some of them really surprise me with how good they are. My favorite is still Eneru because his power is lightning, so you can create a giant ball of lightning and take out at least 150 people at once. It is
Hmm.
it is ridiculous. It is over the top. It is awesome. So that was my night. How
Yeah.
is your
Well, you know what? You said that it's basically a One Piece variation of Dynasty Warriors. That seems to be the new thing nowadays. Because I remember for a while, it was Smash. Everyone was coming out with their own variation of Smash Brothers, and now we've got obviously Dynasty Warriors. We have Hyrule Warriors. Now we have the One Piece game. So I'm noticing a trend there. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, this is the MSZ podcast. In terms of what we're going to talk about, basically, we're going to work a gimmick. Seems like most podcasts nowadays have a gimmick, so our gimmick is each and every week the opposite host will pick the topic and we will discuss it. And also we do not have our theme song yet. I need to talk to my theme song guy. I have a theme song guy. Yeah, that's right. Jealous. His name is Brian. He is fantastic. I'll make sure I get his info up on the channel. Because off the top of my head, I can't remember what his Twitter is. Zenith, you know what his Twitter is?
uh your final answer, I believe? Let me pull it up.
Yeah, no, I think it isn't it GGADWA.
Yes, it is. His Twitter.
Are you there? Hello. I think Twitter. Oh no! Internet connection problem. No.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, that was scary. You got sucked into the void.
Yes, apparently we experienced internet connection problems. It's okay. We can cut that part.
No, we're leaving it in for posterity. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We don't cut shit like that out on MSZ.
So yeah, we change topics each week. Basically the idea here is that I choose this week's topics, and next week he's going to subject me to some crazy topics of his own.
Absolutely, because the two of us have very similar tastes, but we have quite different tastes too. So I think it'd be a lot of fun and bring in a lot of variation. But we were talking about Brian, I believe, his Twitter account.
Yes, his Twitter account is at GGADWA.
Yeah, his name is Brian Barnes. He has a great YouTube show called Your Final Answer, where it's basically the Grim Reaper answering questions from people. Very funny stuff. And the guy is a great musician. He's done my theme song for my YouTube channel. He's done The Horror Guru. He did his theme song. Isle of Rangoon, their theme song. A few others that I'm probably forgetting, but well worth checking out. So cheap plug there for Brian Barnes. Good job, buddy. I got to talk to him about a theme song. But in the meantime, since we don't have one now, I'm going to make one up. Here we go. Da-da-da-da-da-da. It's the Magic Steve and Zenith Show. It's the Magic Steve and Zenith Show. What'll they talk about? Nobody knows. It's the Magic Steve and Zenith Show. Bing.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
Also, for the record, Brian has done the unofficial theme song for History of One Piece. that aired at the end of that episode. It's going to be official once I get to the next arc of History of One Piece. And he has also appeared multiple times on History of One Piece. So, yeah, check his work out. He does some great stuff. And his Brook impression is pretty fun.
Brian is just the man.
Yes. He's the man with a plan, not named
Stan.
Stan,
No, not named Stan. Okay, not named Stan. My bad.
but he
Eminem's gonna be pissed.
yeah, yeah, I'm sorry, Stan, but the tears gone cold. You wonder why.
Oh, we're doing Dido now. Anyway, let's get to our topic today. Zenith, it is your turn this week. First week, I'm giving you top picks, so please tell us what the topic is.
Well, I had two topics picked out before we started the show, but I do want to briefly touch upon one thing since it happened very recently. Today, in fact, not today, yesterday, the second season of Daredevil dropped. And it dropped like it was hot. It came out. I've only seen 3 episodes, but I do want to briefly talk about it because Daredevil season 1 was one of my favorite uh, of the Marvel Netflix shows. Marvel,
Really, I know that, and Jessica Jones. A lot of people have talked good about.
yeah. I've
Like, talk good. What the fuck am I saying? They talk good about it. Yay!
it was real good. No, I mean, I've seen Agents of Shield up to the middle of season 2, and while Agents of Shield was kind of boring in the beginning, and it kind of found its legs around the end of season 1. Season 2 is just it doesn't have my interest at all. So I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Agents of Shield at the moment. I'm kind of like there has so much potential here, but none of it feels like it matters at all.
Yep, that's exactly the way I was with Arrow. Season 1, I was really into. Midway through season 2, I'm just like done. I just don't care anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Arrow season 3. I liked season 2 because Deathstroke is like awesome.
Oh no, he was great in it, but I mean, halfway through, just like the sister who was dead suddenly isn't dead, and now she's a superhero, and it's I'm sure that's the way it goes in the comics, but they did not
And
portray
she's
it
actually
properly.
dead again now.
Oh, spoilers! Come on. By the way, guys, we will have spoilers in this podcast. So sometimes flagged, sometimes not. You're rolling the dice when you listen to MSZ.
Yeah, honestly, Arrow, nothing really matters in that show right now. I saw to the end of season 3, it was kind of a mess. I haven't seen season 4, but anyway, onto the Marvel Netflix shows. I thought Agents of Shield, nothing really stands out in it. It's nice background noise, but then you start wondering what happens, and then you have to pay attention, and it's not worth paying attention to, if that makes sense. I did love Jessica Jones, though. Jessica Jones deals with some really deep and very hard to handle subject matter, such as rape, vulnerability, um, what happens when you are controlled by someone. And it's handled very, very well. I thought some of the pacing could have been a little bit better, and I did not need the incest twins. Um, in fact, they didn't matter to the story at all. But other than that, I mean, David Tennant performance of the lifetime right there. Like David Tennant kicked it out of the park. Um, but Daredevil season 1, I thought was my favorite in terms of the way it structured itself. It was just a guy. He didn't really seem like the normal Marvel superhero. Yes, he has powers. He's blind. He has heightened senses, but not in the conventional sense. He gets beat up a lot, and I liked how realistic it was. I liked how it dealt with a lot of stuff. The Kingpin was great. Uh, I seen yeah, I can't talk. I've seen now 3 episodes of Daredevil season 2, and it's still continuing with the same kind of tone and the same ideas here. Season 2 starts off dealing with ideas of what it really means to be a vigilante. Season 1 shows Daredevil basically becoming Daredevil. We see him get the costume, we see him fight against the Kingpin, and see what he has to sacrifice to become the superhero. At the end, he is acknowledged by the papers, he is acknowledged as Daredevil. This season explores the consequences of him becoming that superhero, both good and bad. Again, I've only seen 3 episodes, but they bring in the Punisher. This is not a spoiler. They've advertised this. Uh,
Oh yeah, he's been all over.
and the Punisher is a very, very different character. The Punisher kills people. He is not he's very much an anti-hero in this sense, and the Punisher is a perfect foil to Daredevil because Daredevil is a lawyer. He is a person who upholds the law in both facets. Like he is both judge and jury, but he's not executioner. And the juxtaposition against Punisher in this sense is perfect because there's conflict immediately between Punisher and Daredevil. Frank, who is Punisher's real name, Frank wants him to understand that these criminals keep coming back. These criminals, they're going to get right out of jail and they're going to continue doing their acts. And Daredevil says that there's some good in these people and they can change. And that's the big moral quandary of the 3 episodes that I've seen. I mean, immediately from the very beginning, like we see one of the gun dealers from the first season, he's out again. He gets put away by Daredevil and he says, "Oh, I'm just going to be back again in a month." And he says, "I'll see you then." That leads into this whole idea where Punisher is taking out teams of gangs, the Irish mob, the Mexican cartel, these people that should be off the streets, and they're really bad people. They murder people. Hell, like they tried to murder Foggy. But what Daredevil is trying to say is that, we can't decide what it is to be a hero. We don't have that authority to say, we're not above the law, is what he's really saying.
Right, and that whole ties into the whole thing where Daredevil is basically Marvel's Batman. He's acrobatic crime fighter, wears a unique costume, refuses to kill. That whole thing, obsessed with justice.
Yes.
Tragic story, involving dead parents
And so, what I really wanted to discuss with you today about that, since I haven't finished the show, but I wanted to really touch upon the idea present here because it got me thinking. Because both people in this scenario have their really good points. I can totally see the Punisher's point of view because he's a soldier. He's ex-soldier. He sees what happens when people get back and they're just going to keep doing the same things over and over again. Sometimes a permanent solution is necessary. But then I see Daredevil and, I totally get exactly where he's coming from because people do bad things sometimes out of necessity and sometimes they should have another chance to try. Like that's one of the big quotes. It's like they have to have the chance to try again. What is
Hmm.
your feelings on this?
This is getting heavy. I thought we were gonna have fun today, Zenith. I thought we were gonna just be movies. No, no. Honestly, that's you're bringing up the whole capital punishment argument, and really don't know how I feel. It really is a case by case basis. Um, like as far as killing someone in cold blood, I really don't think that's ever a good idea. But that's why we have courts. That's why we have the death penalty in some states, and even states that don't have the death penalty, life in prison and whatnot. But that being said, the Punisher doesn't exist in our world. He exists in a world where people commonly dress up in outlandish costumes and have abilities far beyond mortal men. So the laws can change a little bit there. So I guess I would say I'm undecided.
I'm actually gonna say that I'm on Daredevil's side. Personally, I can completely see the argument about a permanent solution for these things. But I'm completely against a death penalty. For one thing, because we can be wrong. People make mistakes. Even Punisher, who does a lot of research before he takes out his targets, can be mistaken. And sometimes, if you give people another chance, they can change.
Well, of course, and you look at even a show like Dexter, he made mistakes. Um, but at the same time, we're not talking about our real world. We're talking about a fictionalized version of our world, very similar, but not the same. The same laws and rules don't necessarily apply.
hmm And this is also the same universe where a person named the Purple Man, or Kilgrave, as he's known in Jessica Jones, can manipulate someone enough to where he makes them kill themselves, and he ends up dying near the end of the series. Again, spoilers. But
Right. And then, by the way, if you guys hear like a banging or a scratching, my cat has decided to be an asshole. I am not paying attention to him, so he decided to interrupt our podcast. Rugen? Yeah, that's right, buddy. Son of a bitch. I'm sorry. Go on, bud.
this is the same universe where the Purple Man, or Kilgrave as he's known in Jessica Jones, can control people, manipulate them to the point where he can make people kill themselves in extremely gory ways. He can make people do anything he wants. And so in a world like that, maybe a permanent solution is necessary, and they do go that route in that series. Um and it's a tough call to make. I'm still on Daredevil's side, but I can completely see why the Punisher and Jessica would make the arguments that they make in their own series. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to bring that up briefly. I still haven't finished Daredevil yet, and next week I may be finished, and we can discuss it a little bit further. I don't know if you've seen any of it, but
I have not seen any of it yet. No,
okay.
it's in my list of my very large list of things to do. That since the new job, time is getting very tiny and very small to do these things.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I work a graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 in the morning, which is why I, on the weekend, stay up all night because, otherwise I won't keep that schedule. And that's why I
Right.
spend my time playing One Piece and watching Daredevil, because I'm usually too tired to edit during these times. And also because I'm working on casting for my Undertale review as well.
Which reminds me, I need to get you those audio files. I'll record that when I'm done here.
But yeah, so I don't have as much time as I used to work on stuff, but when I do, I like to check out stuff like Daredevil, because Daredevil does deserves your attention.
Absolutely. All right. It's it's about 18 minutes into our podcast. I think it's now finally time that we get to our topic for the day. Zenith, would you do the honors?
All right. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about modern versus classic, in two different senses. We in our society do not like a lot of things that are modern in terms of media. A lot of media has been catered to a different crowd, or it has a certain negative quality to it that we generally gravitate towards classic media. For example, we do not like reboots and remakes because that happens so very often these days, and we gravitate towards the originals. And the same thing with video games. With modern games, we tend to maybe not as much lately, because recently there have been a lot of really good video game properties in modern gaming. But modern versus classic, a lot of people gravitate towards the classic. So yeah, this topic today is going to be modern versus classic, for both movies and video games, talking about reboots and remakes versus originals, and talking about modern gaming versus classic gaming. So to start us off today, I wanted to dive into this whole video game aspect. I have been playing a lot of modern video games lately, and it is a very mixed bag in some senses, but a lot of my favorite video games lately have been modern games. Undertale is fantastic, and while it has a retro aesthetic, it was made only December of last year. It is a modern game. Again, One Piece Pirate Warriors, have been playing a lot of that. That is a modern video game. At the same time, I also played a lot of Super Mario Maker, which is it is a modern video game, but it's basically us remaking Super Mario Brothers, which is a classic franchise, and you can basically make classic levels yourself.
Hey, that's the entire reason I bought a Wii U was for Mario Maker.
So my opening question to you is, which do you prefer, modern or classic games, and why?
Uh, I would definitely say classic. Well, I mean, it depends on the property, the franchise. There are modern games I play. I played quite a few of them, but in general, I find myself having more fun going back to the games I played as a kid. You know, that nostalgia. But not only that, just for some reason, the gameplay to me just was so much more tight and concise and fun. You can call me old, and I am old. I'm sure that's a big part of it. But playing a lot of modern games, I just don't have as much fun or engagement in. There's too much going on. Even I know that sounds like an old fogey thing to say, but once again, it's true. You know, hold. You know, you play like some of these third-person shooters, which I like third-person shooters, but it's like okay, to access your menu, hold X, Y, and tap the right trigger 3 times. Tap it 4 times to fire a grenade. If you want to pull out your shiv and shiv the nearest person next to you, take your controller and stick it up your ass. I mean, some of these controls that they have get so complex to remember, it really takes me out of it. So I find myself playing more older franchises, older games. I've got a Genesis. I still play Genesis games. I loved as a kid the old point and click adventure games. Those are my bread and butter. So I go to good old games and I'll download. Like I have the whole Quest for Glory series I'm going through again. Um, that's the type of stuff I normally like to do as a classic. In terms of a modern game that I would enjoy or I do enjoy, I like the Arkham games. I really loved Shadow of Mordor, and I have no idea why they haven't. I haven't heard anything about a sequel. It sold well, it got great reviews, and no sequel. But that's an instance of a game that did have complex controls, semi-complex, but it was just so much fun you couldn't help but love it.
For me, my argument is storytelling. I completely understand your point that classic games had much tighter controls, but that's a lot of the game development time and a lot of the game itself was spent focusing on gameplay because back then you didn't have to have a story to your game. They spent 95% of their time not on graphics, not on story, not on these things that we take for granted today, but strictly on gameplay. If you look at Mega Man classics, they didn't have to worry about a lot of the things they worry about now, so they could focus on that tight gameplay.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm gonna let you finish. I'm gonna let you finish. But at the same time, like even games like that, like Mega Man, they did have a story. Now you can argue that it's paper thin, but I 100% when I was a kid, I was into the storyline of these games. Fighting games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat have a storyline, and I was even as thin as it was. I actually kind of preferred it because I would sit there and theorize what's going on, what's the story between this and that, how is this character, and then you beat the game, you get the ending cinematic, and you can tie things in from there. So they did have a storyline. Even Bubble Bobble has a storyline. It's
Well,
just not as fleshed out as some games.
it has a plot, not a storyline. To me, story is all about a narrative that it is deep and engaging and compelling. Plot is just the plot of what happens in the game. Even Tetris has a plot, technically. You can say that any video game has a plot, technically. But when I refer to story, I'm talking about stuff where Uncharted has an engaging storyline versus Super Mario Brothers, which yes, you could read the pamphlet and get the plot of the game, um, but overall, it's not a story-driven game. If you get what I'm saying. But yeah, for me, modern gaming has advanced to what we can do in terms of storytelling to the point where story is as important, if not more important, as gameplay. Obviously, you cannot have a game without gameplay. It's an essential feature, even though some people argue that actual games like Journey and a walking simulators aren't really games. If you can pick up a controller and go through it and play it, it has gameplay, that's a game,
Well,
regardless.
it all depends on your definition of gameplay. Like, look at something like Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. Would you consider that a game?
I've never actually heard of that game, so
Oh, you have. Oh, I'm sorry. But the big gameplay is basically it's a slideshow with a story. There is a story going on, and it's almost like choose your own adventure. You get to choose which, option the characters, decide to go down, or which route they decide to go down. But the entire gameplay, it was for, I believe, CDI, and the entire gameplay revolves around just which option do you want to pick. You click the option you want, and the story progresses.
well then it is technically a game. Anything that has input from another person, from a player, is a game. That's why board games are called games, because there's input from someone other than the device that you're using to play it on. If you could play a board game without players, then it wouldn't be a game. Like it's this may sound weird the way I'm phrasing it, but the way I see it, visual novels, stuff like that, as long as you're inputting something, as long as you have some direct input on what's going on screen or in front of you if you're playing a board game, that is a video game, no matter what. But in terms of modern games, again, I think that we have advanced storytelling to such a degree that it's essential. There are games that I do play that don't have a big emphasis on story. Like Pirate Warriors 2 does have a story, but I would play it even if it didn't have it because it's so fun to play. But most of the games that I play these days require a story for me to invest a lot of my time into it. I want to understand these characters. I want to get into the world of the game. And that can be done without a story, but a story really enhances that feeling. To give you an example, when I first really started getting to when I first really started getting into gaming was when I started playing Final Fantasy IX at my friend's house. It was the first time I had ever played a role playing game, and I started playing it, and what drew me into it was the story. Yes, the gameplay was a lot of fun. It's the active time battle system is extremely well crafted, but the story is what made me fall in love with the game, especially because you don't really start combat until maybe like 2 3 hours into Final Fantasy IX, because a lot of the setup is you like involves a play and you reenacting a play, and I think that's fantastic. Games like Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy X, uh, games like that in our modern landscape have pushed the boundaries of what is capable in a story. And whether or not you think they're good stories, they have advanced what we expect in a video game.
But you see, even back in, and I agree with that. But even back in the day, you could find very in depth, very intricate storylines. Look at any RPG from the SNES era. I mean, or even like hell, I've told you previously, my favorite RPG of all time is Lunar. That was the first one I ever played, and that was my first introduction to, oh, holy crap, a game can be really in depth and have a really engaging story.
Unfortunately, though, and I will agree with you that those RPGs are extremely well crafted. I haven't played Lunar, but I've played a lot of the other ones that you talked about before. Yes, they still had that storylines there, but back then they were the outlier rather than the norm. Nowadays, a story is kind of like graphics and sound design. It's a building block that is essential rather than something that they might focus on. uh Back in those days, you didn't really have a lot of teams focusing on intense storylines, mostly because there was a stigma around RPGs that they weren't really going to sell.
Well, that may be true, but there's still it also depends highly on the genre. You look at games nowadays, and a lot of people, and I to this day will talk to people. I'll say, and for the record, by the way, I want to mention I'm with you. I love a storyline. I play games mostly for the storyline. But all throughout my life, and even to this day, I run into people who say, "Man, I really like this game, but I just can't stand like I why can't you skip the cutscenes? I just want to play the game." They do not care whatsoever about the story. They've told me flat out they wish they could play a game that has no story. You just play it, which I do not understand whatsoever. But hey, more power to them. But there are games, like that. You look at games like I'll give you an example like Angry Birds. Yes, there, as you mentioned, there is a plot, but there's no story. Call of Duty. Call of Duty does have a single player campaign, but how often do you hear people talking about that? They go online and they do multiplayer with their friends.
Well, that's because
Um,
the Call of Duty storyline, for the most part, is 4 hours or less, and it's not very good most of the time. I will say Modern Warfare 2 had a pretty engaging story, but and like I said, I played a lot of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 back in the day. I was a huge multiplayer guy, but that's
oh yeah,
only because the game didn't offer me much else in the way of the single player because it was geared toward multiplayer. And in that
exactly. It's geared
sense,
towards. I'm sorry. Go on.
in that sense, I don't, there have been a lot of modern games that have been trying to say, oh, well, let's gear it towards multiplayer and just take out the single player campaign so we don't tack it on. But these games have been wildly unsuccessful because they still charge the same price point and because they don't actually add anything to replace a single player campaign.
A perfect example of that is the recent release of Street Fighter Five.
Yeah, like there's no meat in Street Fighter 5. Also like Star Wars Battlefront or Mag or any of the recent multiplayer games that have completely removed story. And it's like, yeah, you took out the main complaint where the story was short, unfocused, and tacked on, but you didn't give me anything else. I gravitated towards Modern Warfare 2 because it added so much to fill the gap of, well, the storyline is okay, but the multiplayer gives me so much more. I think stories, they're not 100% necessary. I understand there are people who don't want storylines in games or who just ignore them, and that's fine. That is fine, but I think what storylines can do is enhance an experience, help you learn about these characters. So when you're playing as these characters, you care about what happens to them. But anyway, we've talked about video games a lot, and I'm sure that's a topic that we can delve into in future episodes where we can give more detail. We just gave a kind of a general overview of different points relating to the topic, and there's a lot more that we can say. But let's move on to movies because movies is a much bigger topic in this sense. So there's two parts to this. There's remakes and reboots. Can they be better than the original? And also modern versus classic filmmaking. Now, I just saw a movie last night called Zootopia. It is now my new favorite Disney movie, and I love a lot of the classic like Disney Renaissance '90s films and some of the earlier Disney films, but I think they've entered a new renaissance in terms of their content, and I think that modern filmmaking can surpass some classic. Uh, so Steve, yeah, what do you think? Do you think modern filmmaking is better than classic? What's your take on that?
Modern filmmaking is never always going to be better or worse than classic filmmaking. It really all relies on an individual case by case basis. I can think of plenty of classic movies I love to this day. I can think of many modern movies that I feel are in my top films of all time. It really just depends on what it is. Now, in terms of do they have more ability or not ability? How can I word this? Do they have more resources at their fingertips to make something better nowadays? Yes. Technology's improved. Uh, People are dumping much more money into film than they did in the golden years, the olden days. They're putting a lot more into it. But the problem there is they can get over reliant on, okay, well, if we just throw a lot of money on it and put a lot of technology into it, then
Batman v
it'll be a
Superman.
hit.
Cough.
Yeah, ha, exactly, exactly. So they can get over reliant on that. When it comes down to it, deep down, you need a good story to carry everything. And even if you have a good story, the studio can come in and they can mess it up and change things. And even if they don't, if you fund it yourself and you make your movie and the storyline is awesome and it's exactly the way you want it to be, the movie can still get bogged down by either bad performances, bad direction, bad cinematography. There's so much that goes into it. Basically, for a truly great film, you need lightning in a bottle. You need all these resources to come together and work together flawlessly,
Mm.
or damn near to it. And that has happened in the past with older movies from the even the silent era, um, and it has happened with some modern movies. 10 Cloverfield Lane, damn near perfect. I loved that movie. So it really depends.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you're saying. I mean, for me, I love classic films like black and white. Some of my favorite films are Citizen Kane and It's a Wonderful Life, and a lot of those films that were made in a time where there was so much attention to detail. Because in black and white, you really have to worry about lighting and positioning and camera work just to convey everything that you need in a scene.
Oh yeah, classic Hitchcock was just brilliant.
Rope, Psycho.
Yeah, Rope. Oh, I can't believe you know about Rope. That we saw that in a cinema class I took
Mhm.
in college, and I was hooked instantly. I'm like, holy crap, this is amazing.
And back then, that was like almost a single take film. I believe
Yeah,
there's like two
there
cuts.
were there were three takes, three there were two cuts, three separate takes. But they blended them in so you don't really see them.
Hmm.
Very very awesome. In fact, they redid or they reused that concept fairly recently. I want to say within the last 5 or 6 years with a horror movie. Do you remember what that was called?
I don't think I've heard of that. No,
Gosh, it's
unfortunately.
gonna drive me crazy. It was a pretty good movie. It wasn't great,
Hmm.
but it was good. And just like with Rope, it seems like it's all one continuous shot.
Hmm.
They do have cuts, and you can tell like they'll zoom really tight into something. You're like, okay, they cut there, but the whole movie is filmed as if it's one continuous, shot. There's no camera breaks or anything like that, and it's really disturbing and really creepy. I wish I could remember the name
Hmm.
of it.
Um, Classic films, by necessity, because of the limitations of technology, had to be meticulously planned and edited, especially because they didn't have the digital editing that we do today. That's why a lot of films tried to be one cut. That's why Hitchcock tried to save it, because Hitchcock did not have a lot of money to work with. So every single time he had to cut the film, he had to pay for that reel, so he didn't want to have to do that. And that's why he tried to do Rope in pretty much one cut. I mean, yes, there, like you said, there are cuts in the film, but that was budget limitations. At the same time, while modern films do get a bad rap for using lazy CGI and stuff like that, just take a look at Mad Max Fury Road. The technicals in that film, oh my god, just I was blown away by that film. It deserved all the Oscars it got for the technicals, because that was meticulously planned, meticulously edited. Every single thing, like there was practical effects. The stunts were all their own individual stunts. Everything was thought out, and nothing was lazy in it.
Oh, absolutely. But then you look at something like Jupiter Ascending.
Oh boy.
Exactly. Or
I create
uh,
life.
the Seventh Son. When I saw Jupiter Ascending, I saw a double feature that and the Seventh Son with I went out with Shire. We went out to a theater and we saw those two together back to back. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun because they're both so bad, but they're enjoyably bad. I mean, and that's another thing you can speak to as well. A bad movie doesn't necessarily mean it's unenjoyable to watch.
Hmm. And I mean, there were bad movies back in the day as well. It's just we weren't around to witness them. Another thing that I want to bring up in terms of technicals is Star Wars: The Force Awakens. oh my god, technical powerhouse, and it wasn't reliant on new technology. You can have a classical looking film using as little CGI as possible. Uh, I mean, yes, that a lot of money was thrown at Star Wars, a lot of money was thrown at Mad Max. But Mad Max initially started out as a very, very low budget film franchise, and only recently has gotten the money to get this recent film. And it took years to make Fury Road. Like I think they were planning it for like 10 years or so, just so they could get the technology to do some of these shots, and just so they could get the budget to do some of it.
And it paid off. It's a badass film.
So I mean, again, I think it's a case of a case by case basis. I don't think the argument holds up that modern film is bad. And I think it's just we perceive that because we're bombarded by Alvin and the Chipmunks, Chipwrecked or The Road Chip or whatever bad film is out these days, or whatever schlock we get in January. Yes, there are bad films, but the good ones shine through.
True, but at the same time, though, I mean, it's all in the eye of the beholder. If you look at, there's a podcast I listen to called "How Did This Get Made?" Very awesome, very funny podcast, and basically it's three actors and writers in Hollywood, and they just talk about certain bad movies and how they got made, and they riff on them, and it's a lot of fun. But they always end the episode with second opinions. They go to IMDb and they read old reviews for these movies where they gave them 5 stars. Things like where people have said Jingle All the Way is their favorite movie of all time. Um, so it really depends on the person. Some people really do legitimately, unironically like movies that the rest of us consider bad. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Hmm. I mean, I can completely agree with that. It is all subjective. There are people who won't like it, and there are people who will like it. And I think it's the same way with remakes and reboots. Yes, there is a lot of new IP out there that you're not seeing because it probably doesn't get marketed as much as remakes. But there are some really good remakes out there. The new Karate Kid, I loved.
See, I never saw that one.
It has Jackie Chan as Mr. Miyagi. He does a great job. Jaden Smith does a passable job in the film, and they actually much more relate it to kung fu and uh, the idea of what each move means than the Karate Kid did. Because in the original Karate Kid, the movements, while related to karate, they didn't explicitly make it known why he was waxing the car. Here, kung fu is incorporated in everything, and people in real life incorporate kung fu movements into everything that they do because kung fu is a way of life to them. This really happens, and they explain it in the film. I think it was great. Not a lot of people agree that the new Karate Kid was great. I loved it. I know some other people who I follow really like it as well. But that's just the thing. People get turned off because it's a remake, because they want it to be exactly like the original, or they don't want the original image to be tarnished in their minds. Um, but that to me is an example of how you can remake something and still have it be good. Improve on the original while still keeping the spirit of the original. And it can happen. In that same vein, the new Ghostbusters coming out, I'm really excited for. And there's a lot of contention about the new Ghostbusters because they changed to it an all female cast. They have one African. They have one African American actress in there as well, and a lot of people are very contentious about a lot of these points. But I saw the trailer and it looks good. I will reserve judgment until I see it, but remakes can be good. Ghostbusters could blow you out of the water. You never know.
Absolutely. All right, we are getting low on time, so I think it's about time we wrap this up. Zenith, I'm going to ask you your favorite movie you've seen in the last 12 months and what you think is the worst movie that you've seen in the last 12 months. Go.
The best and the worst. Um,
Yes.
the problem is I haven't seen too much in the theaters. Best, uh,
It doesn't have to be in the theater, just in general.
in general, probably Zootopia, because that's the most fresh in my mind. I would really have to look back and see everything that I've seen, but yeah, Zootopia is very fresh in my mind. I There's not a wasted shot, there's not a wasted moment in that film. Honestly, at no point in the film was I thinking to myself, this scene could have been cut. Everything is necessary, and that's rare in a film these days. The worst I can say, without exaggeration, Dance Foo.
Dance. Okay, you need to tell me the plot to this because I've never heard of this movie and it sounds amazing.
Ed Mac.
Hold on. I gotta get my popcorn.
Okay.
Okay, go.
So at MagFest, it was my roommate Matthew Iannone of the Sports Reels birthday. We A whole bunch of people from the Reviewerverse were there. Including a lot of Channel Awesome producers, a lot of our friends, Jess and just a film brain and rap critic and Count Jacula horror guru, like a whole
Sure.
bunch of
A
people.
bunch of people.
Yeah, too many to list. But we were there, and so they decided to put on this film. I believe it's called Dance Foo. It stars Kel Mitchell, and it's supposed to be like he was trying to make a B movie, comic book style superhero film, but in the vein of like a B movie. And some comedy writer was directing it or something like that. I don't know all the particulars because I just was subjected to it. But even Kel couldn't save this movie. Uh, from what I gather of the plot, he is playing both the villain and the hero. Uh, the villain is, I think it was Three Eye Willie. It was really weird. So it's a kung fu comic book style movie, but they're dancing and fighting, and Kel's learning how to fight by a Fu Manchu looking guy, and it was just it was god awful. Every single line of dialogue, I was questioning what the hell was going on, and it wasn't funny, and it just uh, Jess
Uh,
says it's one of her favorite movies, and again, she had just gotten out of seeing 50 Shades of Black, so maybe this looked better in comparison because that was bad. But Dance
Hey,
Foo,
again, to each their own. You know, we all have our own preferences and things we like. So Dance Foo, is that on Netflix? Can I go stream it right now?
give me 50 seconds and I will look.
You have 45. Zenith's looking up the info. Magic Steve is sitting in his chair and he is waiting to find out if Netflix will stream the movie.
Nope. But I can find out where it is though.
He is going to look up where you can stream the movie today, and if you can't, then you should go to Amazon and buy it now. Boom, boom.
Actually, I found it on YouTube. Uh,
Oh, very cool.
Not a very good quality cut, but it's a cut.
Well, there you go, ladies and gents. If you want to watch Dance Foo, you can find it on YouTube.
But yeah, it's the tagline that it has on YouTube by the person who uploaded it was a young championship dancer seeking fortune and fame is forced to avenge the death of his uncle.
Well, okay.
That sounds
I mean,
better
those
than
things just go together like, peanut butter and jelly.
yeah. It's one of those films that takes things and puts it together, but it doesn't have the finesse of things like Kung Fu Hustle, Kung Fu Dunk, or Shaolin Soccer, or that cooking kung fu show. Those Chow Yun Fat productions or whatever they were. Those are good because they balance everything perfectly and they have great choreography and whatnot. This is Kel Mitchell being Kel Mitchell, and I love him, but he cannot save this movie.
Hey, when the kid from Good Burger can't save it, you know that you're doomed. Anyway, my picks for best movie, I actually have three of them. I can't pick. I love all three of them. The best movies I have seen in the last 12 months. Split between 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is amazing. If John Goodman does not win an Oscar, I am gonna we riot. We riot if he does not get an Oscar. Uh, 10 Cloverfield Lane was very good. Deadpool, I mean, I expected high, marks from this, and it did not disappoint. Deadpool is hilarious. It shot well. It did so on a micro budget. And by the way, going back to the CG argument, they did have good CG in Star Wars Force Awakens or Unleash. Unleash is the video game. Star Wars Force Awakens. They did have really good CGI, except for the weird octopus monster thing that's in Harrison Ford's ship. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That looked pretty bad. So here's my question. With all the money they dumped into Star Wars, why did that monster look so bad when Colossus in Deadpool looked amazing?
Well, think of it this way. In Star Wars, you don't really see these creatures for very long. They're only on screen for maybe a minute, two tops, and even then it's mostly just shots, quick cuts and shots like that. Where I think they wanted to spend more of their budget elsewhere, where it wasn't very long a scene. Colossus and Deadpool, they are in the movie for a long time, to the point where if any parts of those shots had been less budget, then they would have gotten a lot of flack. It's
That very well may be true. That's a good argument.
especially because they make a joke in the Deadpool film to say, okay, well, we didn't have the budget to get any other X-Men. We got Colossus and this girl who doesn't fight that often, mostly because they had to use the effects for her powers, and probably a lot of the budget went to Colossus.
Well, they also completely rewrote the character's powers for the movie.
Yes, and
Yeah,
the look of the character and whatnot, they
exactly.
modernized it, and I had no problem with the modernization of Negasonic Teenage Warhead, which is the coolest name for a superhero ever.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to name my first child that. Anyway, Deadpool, 10 Cloverfield Lane, both great movies. The third movie, it's actually a short film, but you can see it on Netflix. You can see it on YouTube absolutely free. Kung Fury. I freaking loved Kung Fury. Filmed and aged to make it look like it came out of the like early 80s. It is a satire film. It is so damn funny. I don't want to spoil it for you. If you haven't seen it or heard of it, what the fuck is wrong with you? Go to YouTube right now. Go to Netflix right now. Stream Kung Fury. It is badass. You will love it. Boom!
Yeah, I've heard really good things about Kung Fury.
Wait, holy shit. Zenith. You A2 Zenith? You haven't seen Kung Fury?
I've been told to watch it, and I saw the first few minutes of it. I just haven't had time to really fully sit down and watch it.
You saw the first. It's only a half hour, man. It is 30 minutes. It's not even 30 minutes. I think it's like 25.
Yeah, I do need to make time for that.
Oh, definitely.
But you know what you need to make time for, and this is one that I just remembered. It's a film called The Imposter. I didn't see it this year, but I saw it last year. It's really really great. It's a real it's based on a real life story about a guy who uh basically he pretended to be a child that was missing, that had been missing for years. He was in another country. He called up like child services, and he found the picture of a missing child, and he pretending to be that child for years. And it's a story of this family and trying to figure out what really happened to the child.
Okay. It's called The Imposter or
The
Impostors.
Imposter.
Okay, I'm going to look that up. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. This was our inaugural episode of MSZ. We hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can fuck yourself. No, I'm kidding. If you didn't, let us know what you'd like to see or hear instead, and we'll see what we can do to accommodate that. Now, as far as next week goes, before I mention our topic that we're going to talk about then, quick plugs. Once again, I plugged my music guy, Brian Barnes. I'm also going to plug, obviously, Zenith Will Rule. He's got a great channel. Check it out. Radio Dead Air with Nash. There's too many to count. We're gonna plug different people every week, so those are my three this week. It'd be Brian, Zenith, and Nash. Now, in terms of where to find me online, I have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Magic magicsteve83. I do different types of videos. I do interviews with people, the occasional movie review, vlogs. I do creepypasta narration, which I'm just starting to get into, and I'm having a lot of fun with. So, hey, if any of you have a creepypasta you want me to narrate, send it my way. I'm looking for new material. And that's it for me. Zenith, what would you like to plug and where can we find you?
Well, I would like to plug Magic Steve because
Aw.
he does a great job. He's done a lot for my show in terms of like additional like voice acting and stuff like that. He was Garland in Final Fantasy 1 for my show. He does a great job. So, go check him out. I would also like to plug uh Chris the Nerd. Chris the Nerd does a show called As Failed on TV, which is basically taking infomercials that are completely ridiculous, but they're advertised on TV today, and makes fun of them. He also does a bunch of other stuff. He does his own like abridged series, and he's also appeared on my show multiple times. And I would also like to plug Cartoon Hero. Cartoon Hero has done a long running show, does a lot of different reviews, basically reviews TV shows and movies that are animated, and he also touches upon games on his Art of Gaming series. But right now he's almost done with all the Pokemon films. He's doing his last Pokemon month, so check that out right now. He deserves your attention. And you
All
can
right. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you'd keep going. No, I'm sorry.
and yeah, you can find my stuff at youtube.com/Zenith will review.
Am I good now?
No. Yeah, no, you're good.
You're not going to smack me?
Now, why would I do something like that? Do I look like a bitch?
I don't understand. I feel like we're both doing two separate bits here. So I'm gonna 86 this one. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, MSZ. Oh, the topic for next week. So next week, Zenith, even though it's my turn to pick the topic, I'm going to let you choose.
Choose the next topic?
As a choose your own adventure, motherfucker. That's right. Next show, we are going to be reading a choose your own adventure novel. I will be reading the book, and Zenith will be making the choices. Maybe even a special guest assisting if I can get someone to come on. So next week, choose your own adventure. Tune in for that. Thank you so much for joining us. And hey, this is Magic Steve saying goodbye.
Bye.
You want to give us a goodbye?
I choose to say goodbye.
You choose to say goodbye.
You see what I did there with goodbye. Bye, everybody.
Later, everyone.